you may have an idea of what your day will look like, but then you might have callbacks throughout that day from that call. And so then all of a sudden your schedule has to like slightly shift and adjust. And so there's adaptability in that sense. But then it also goes into further and deeper, it might sound cheesy as well, where we were kind of discussing about like Broadway isn't the end all be all sort of situation. Again, how we were saying, like, we are both successful artists in this business, but Broadway isn't just like the end of it all. If, I don't know
Yeah,
if I'm
well,
making
another
sense of
way
it,
of saying that is, Broadway is just an address. Like it doesn't make you a lesser of an artist because you're not on
yeah.
Broadway.
Or more of an artist, either.
I've been on the short list for how many shows, and a lot of them have been on Broadway, and I I haven't I haven't made a Broadway debut, but it doesn't mean that my talent and what I have to offer isn't just at the same level.
Yes.
Because I mean, we all know it's about being lucky, for the most part, and
Yeah.
and being prepared when you're lucky.
Yeah.
That's one thing that an acting mentor of mine here in New York always will say is like, half like more than half the battle is luck, but you have to show up to get lucky.
Yes.
If you're not prepared
Yeah.
and you're not there for that opportunity, it's never gonna line up. So that's important. Also, always to put your best foot forward. And part of that is also that it looks different for every single person. Like Maria's process is completely different than mine. Her hard work is very different. It just we work differently, and we work similarly but differently. And part of that is being able to. For me, I know, for example, I break down things into small steps because when I get overwhelmed with something, like when I went in for Hamilton originally, I literally had 91 pages to learn in 2 or 3 days, like 91 pages.
And it's not like singing a song. It's word, 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 word. You're
Yeah, I
rapping.
mean, and Lin Manuel, like I didn't realize how brilliant he was until I actually sat down and
And like
I
started dissecting.
like started to scan that work because it's like Shakespeare. It really is. It's like there is an intention behind every downbeat that it falls on. It's just like so specific, and that helps you actually learn that kind of stuff. But it's like breaking down those little things of tools I already have that I can use to apply to something that's completely overwhelming. If you would have asked me like then how I did it, is like one, I think I remember I was like, I'm not going to get overwhelmed. I'm not going to get
Yeah.
overwhelmed. I'm not going to get overwhelmed. And two, I kept getting callbacks because I was so prepared because of that. There were a lot of people who couldn't, who had trouble with the work, and rightfully so. But there was something that is just like, if you find something that you can switch on to help you and aid you for that kinds of stuff, like it will do you so much good in your own process, finding those things that work for you, because some things are not. It's like it takes trial and error. Like sometimes you're going to try this and then you're like, it didn't work for me. Like maybe I'll try, I'm going to, this felt good, let's try doing this next time, when I'm preparing for something, or I'm preparing a role, or I'm in a class, like whatever it may be. I think everybody is different, and it's like I can't emphasize that enough, is that everybody has a different journey.
Mm-hmm.
Like um is part of it is like what you say, stay in your own lane. Is that you said that before to me? Stay in your own lane. And it's like not like, oh, don't check out, like like respect other lanes. I don't. This is not good. This is not a good way to acknowledge it. But it's
Well,
just
it's
like,
just in the matter of fact of not comparing yourself
yeah,
to somebody
for
else.
sure. Yeah, and if I compare myself to Maria, I'd be done. Like she's literally one of the most successful people in this industry. Sorry to put you on the spot, but like she is. But like that's all hard work, and anybody who works with this girl like will say that it's like deserved, and she maximizes her opportunities because she does the things that people are not necessarily willing to do all the time, and that's part of it. Is like, how do you stand out in that way? Sometimes that effort drive is like, people's perseverance is so attractive to people on the other side of the table. My friend Eddie Lee, he was the first Asian person in Hamilton ever, and he, or on Broadway, I should say. And he, sorry, I bring up Hamilton a lot. It's just on my mind. Um, but he literally went in like 9 times, and then
And went
and
through like the boot camp
he went to the
as
boot
well.
camp, didn't get it. He went through all this whole process, and he kept just trying to walk through those doors that he saw opening, and eventually one of those doors stayed open, and part of that is maximize your opportunity by trying to create your own path. And sometimes that also path, like if you're trying to force it, that's not the path. Like you can take this route and see where you end up. You might end up in the same place anyway.
That's awesome.
This is such a weird setup.
I know it's very weird,
but not be able to like new way of living.
That's great. So, do y'all want me to start some questions from these guys?
Sure, and then we can kind of.
Yeah, and y'all can riff on that. Y'all can do whatever it is that you want to do. It's your time. We won't get to all of their questions, so that's not really relevant. The first one I'm going to bring up is I didn't think that any of them knew this, because I didn't know when they got this or how they could get this from their research on you. But someone in here obviously knew that ICB was y'all's roommate, because a lot of them did the live this fall, and Ian came in and he did choreography with Jessica for that show. So they were like, tell us one ICB story.
We love him. About his story.
I don't know. Can we tell some of these stories? No, I'm kidding. Wow.
About like how we all got together, or
that's all. The question just said, tell us one ICB story.
Okay, so here's a story.
So we were living in Astoria, and we were in a 2-bedroom apartment at that time. And our roommate ended up moving out, so we were like looking for a new roommate. And what is he considered, like your younger brother or something?
Yeah, he's kind of my little brother. I've taken him under my wing ever since he's been here, but like he doesn't need that. He's more than capable. It's just we've always really gelled. Actually, the thing is, I'm hesitant to bring this up, but like Scott and Jay Riss definitely know this person. But the first time I ever met Ian was my best friend from college, Seth, who recently, unfortunately, just passed away. He was really close with Ian because they were both from St. Louis area. And
yeah, that's true.
Seth lost his voice, and he could not, Ian was shadowing him that weekend or whatever. And so Ian kind of actually tagged along with me a lot because Seth couldn't really talk or anything. So that's how I got to know Ian, and I thought he was a pretty awesome guy. And there was something about that. I think that trip that even the moments that Seth and Ian had together was something super special, because Ian's super freaking talented. Like he is a hard worker, and he definitely grew a lot from the time I saw him as a freshman. And I think I came back his senior year and I saw him do a rep class, and I was blown away with the growth, and just knowing him. Like, we see his process too. He is one of the hardest workers
I've ever seen.
He hustles all the time, and that was good because our whole household because Ian lived with us for years.
Yeah, so Ian had moved in with us while we were in Astoria, and then I actually was out on the White Christmas tour at this time, or towards the end.
Oh yeah, you didn't mean it. Yeah, you didn't mean it.
And Kevin received a notice in the mail that our building was being bulldozed, and we had to move out as soon as possible. And so at that time, luckily Ian had booked a job on the cruise.
Yeah, he was going to do after midnight.
After midnight. Cruise. And so we kind of separated for a bit because he went out on the boat, and then we ended up finding another apartment. Then that wasn't the best living situation. And so we were looking for another apartment. And again, we found like another 2-bedroom, but we were like, well, we can't afford that on our own. So we checked in with Ian again. He was like, I'm actually getting off the ship at that time.
Yeah, it was like 2 years later, I think.
Yeah, so we ended up moving back in all together again, which is really awesome.
Ian's the best roommate too.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the only people that I've had is like super respectful as a roommate. But like, that's beside the point. But
that saved a lot of money. If you're looking into New York, having 3 people in a 2-bedroom will save you a lot of money.
Yeah, you'll see that if you ever come out in New York. It's like I think my first apartment, I literally was sharing a bed with somebody. So I had like every other night we rotated who is going to sleep in the room.
Don't do that.
That's like, don't do that. Like, I was like,
I didn't approve that. He didn't tell me about that.
No, I did not tell you about that.
Okay, I have another twofer for you that might lead into this, because one of the next questions on here that came up a lot was, could you tell them kind of the best and worst parts of going on tour, since you've both done a lot of it? And first steps that you think are important when you're moving to New York to kind of set yourself up.
That's great.
I'm going to start with best.
Yeah. Well, our tour experiences have been different.
She was in a short engagement.
Yeah, because I did White Christmas, and so you can only celebrate Christmas for a certain amount of time. So it's a short engagement tour. And actually the whole tour was very beneficial in regards to, it's the holiday season, so people are happier. It's a shorter amount of time, so there's not enough time to really butt heads in the situation. Because after a while, when you're with a certain group, you get closer. You have to learn how to live with those people, because you are, and not even just on tour, but when you're in a long running show, you start to live with them. And so it's learning how to adapt in that situation, and just working with different personalities. So yeah, mine was always really pleasant experience, except my first year on tour. We were in our first city. We were in Peoria, Illinois.
Oh yeah, she got bed bugs.
I got bed bugs.
Just down the street.
It was
sorry, Peoria. Yeah, she didn't realize that. Peoria is lovely, but it was an old hotel.
Not the best situation.
No, it's not. It's a pit. It's okay.
But you know what? I'd rather have bed bugs on tour than in my apartment. So.
All right. Well, I will say the best thing about, because both of us grew up, we didn't go on vacation ever, so we didn't travel ever. Our families were just didn't have enough money, or just were too big to go traveling. And so for me, it was like making up for lost time. I got to see the entire North America. Yeah. It was awesome. To be a part of a show, I was on the King and I tour, the first national, and to be a part of something that was pretty special, because that show, normally I don't like that show at all. I think it's very tokenish, not to get too much into it. Like, there's a way to do it in this day and age. It doesn't age well, we'll just say that. And our production, Bart Scher did such a good job of humanizing those characters. And, you know, it was really an honor to be able to be a part of something like that. And that probably won't ever truly be done that way ever again. Hopefully it will be in some way. But it was a truly special experience, and that element. Part of the things that were difficult, though, was I was on a production tour that tiered down to a short engagement tour like hers. So we ended up going from like sitting down for 5 or 6 weeks to being 1 or 2 weeks. And for an equity tour, that's probably the least amount you'll ever do. I know there's been split.
Have you guys learned about like production contracts versus CETA contracts? Yeah.
So that's the union contract. So once you're part of the union tours that go out, they're tiered in a certain way. And part of it, not to get too much into it, has to do with the guarantees of how much money they're going to make. So the more money they make, essentially, puts you in a higher tier.
And this is something that the producers are negotiating with our union. So they're the ones who kind of decide the contracts. Production is kind of what's considered the top tier of a contract on tour, or I guess just contract in general. And it's the differences between them are money in regards to salary, also your per diem, and the way that housing is set up as well. With production contracts, you get more per diem because you technically are paying for your hotel. But with the CETA contract, the company sets up your hotel, so you get less per diem.
Now, I'm not sure if anybody's union in here, but like there are different circumstances too on a non-union tour where you'll have similar things too. So it's good to know.
Yes.
We're giving the whole lowdown, right?
No,
oh yeah. No, this is good. Yes, this is good. Keep going.
What I will say.
Because so basically a main difference between a non-union tour and a union tour are protection is basically protection. With non-union tours, so I had been offered a few when I was non-union, and my first offer was the Cats tour. And my teacher, who had done Cats on Broadway, he was like, that is going to be your first job and your last job, because your body will be broken after that. And the main reason why he said that is because, one, Cats is like so physically demanding of a show. And then also you would be doing one-nighters. So you'd literally do the show, you'd hop on the bus, sleep on the bus, wake up, and then do a show in a new city. And you would do that every single day.
So protection there would be is that a union tour is guaranteed. You have to have a day off in a certain amount of time. And if you don't, you're compensated. Yes. So like a non-union tour, there wouldn't be those kind of protections. And a per diem would be a different rate. I think it would probably be like a lump sum of things rather than like a daily or weekly kind of situation.
And then also you just have protection in regards to like healthcare on a union tour versus non-union. I would still think they would have workers' comp in case you were injured on non-union, but
they have workers' comp, and you don't get things like PT and for so like that, where you need that PT
so
all the time.
I had a friend on the Mamma Mia national tour for like 3 years, and it was non-NEC. He joined us on the King and I tour that was union, and the reality of like what he was experiencing in King and I was completely different than Mamma Mia, because Mamma Mia, like that show is so physical, and like they were one-nighters. So sometimes they would, from what I understand, is they would drive in and then have to do a show.
Yeah.
Like,
and again, we're not saying like don't ever do a non-union tour. We're just letting you know just the situation.
What the reality what the reality of it. And there's no right or wrong in any situation. It's a different experience.
Because I had a lot of friends do non-union tours, and again, there are different levels of non-union tours as well. Like Theater Works, most of theirs, you're in like a van and you're having to drive around together. Like you guys are the ones driving. Where with other like networks and what's like another, those kind of companies,
like big league theatricals,
they'll most likely have a bus for you and you'll travel that way. Where with most union tours, most of the time you'll travel by plane, but if it's a close enough travel, you'll take a bus.
For example, like when I was in Texas, we drove between like when we were like 3 hours out, I think it's like 3 hours or something like that, you can drive. But like if it's longer than like 6 hours, I think you're flying. Yeah. So on a union tour, so it's a slight difference. If you're on a non-union tour, you're mostly going to be busing and trucking. But a lot of those tours go to international tours, for example. International tours are non-union.
Yes.
But that means if you're a union member, you can work on them because of international. There is no jurisdiction because you're international waters or you're international land, whatever it may be. So that's the one exception I would say.
Yeah. But let's talk about like coming to New York and kind of how to prepare for that. One reason why I did choose AMDA is because it is based in New York. So my transition to New York seemed pretty smooth, just because I actually had a dormitory in the city. I had a spot that I knew I was going to be. I had a community kind of already set up there, but definitely try to save as much money as possible.
Yeah, I did.
It does go by a lot faster than you think.
Or, okay, so one thing to reframe that too is that like it does money goes quick, but also you find what little you can live off of. Yeah. That's not that you can thrive still. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? Like things that are unnecessary that you don't need. But I spent a year out of school I was lucky doing some regional gigs, pretty much I was employed my first year out. And then I decided because of I came out the year the stock market crashed. So Scott sat us down. I remember this. And he's like, you got to prepare yourself because this is not going to be what all your friends have been telling you. You're not going to go to these regional theaters and, work your way up and all that. And it was actually very helpful to have that perspective because it made me drive harder and to persevere through more adversity that I had in those times. Um, and I did a couple gigs in, around the country and then in Chicago where I'm from. And then I couldn't get a day job. So I ended up actually moving to New York because these random day jobs that pay you pretty good hourly rate, like catering or, temping, like they're flexible and they kind of help. They're a little bit more actor friendly. That's why I came to New York. I never really was going to come to New York originally. But I ended up here and I've been here ever since. And I saved a good amount of money. I won't say the number, but like I worked a lot, but because it's different for everybody. But I saved a lot of money and I went through a lot of that money quick because it takes a little time to adapt to the city. Because I came here and nobody really was here from Wesleyan. Like they were either on gigs or they had moved away. I had one person in my class who was here before me, but then she left right away. So like when I got here, it was kind of like I said, forging my own path and trying to figure it out on my own.
Yeah, when Kevin went, that's a good for them to understand. There was a big gap between, like actually the group that after I got here is the group that kind of went to New York, and then the people that graduated right before them came after them and to the city. So there was a real gap. So you had people that were in their 30s and 40s, and then these like 22-year-olds.
Yeah,
so now there's a nice even kind of mix.
For sure. I meet new IWU grads all the time. When I came here, though, Evan, who was a year below me, Evan Kasperzak, he moved like a month before me, and there was nobody here. So like when I got here, he was like, dude, we need to hang out. Like, because he was like trying to figure out the city on his own, even though his brother, Evan knew a lot of people in the city, but still it was kind of a thing where he was trying to find his own way. So that kind of gives you a little perspective of like, too, like there was really nobody in my class. Maybe Justin Banta was here and then he left. It was Katie.
It was Katie and Justin. That was about it.
Yeah, I think it was
Bree wasn't there yet, and lots of people weren't there. Lisa wasn't there yet.
Bree was working all the time. Let's be honest. I love Bree.
Yeah, but she wasn't working out of the city yet.
That's true.
So
yeah.
Yes, but I would say one kind of like helpful thing when you're transitioning into the city, if you have a nice chunk of money saved up, audition for everything you can. As an actor, if you aren't in a show, that's your job, is to audition. And I fortunately with AMDA, your fourth semester classes switched to the evening, so you have all day to audition. But I really took advantage of that. I mean, I was going to at least like 4 auditions a day. But with that, before I graduated, I ended up having 4 jobs lined up. And so that is the main thing when you get to the city. If you have a good chunk of money saved up already, try to get to as many auditions as possible. If you don't have as much money as you were hoping for, I would say try to find that stability job that can help around the audition schedule. So as Kevin had said, a lot of people tend to cater. A lot of friends babysit. We have a lot of bartender friends or waitresses. Or even just like temp work as well is a good idea, because you need something that will be flexible to work around the audition schedule, because you can't really get a show unless you show up.
Yeah, to go off of that, I think that, not to contradict what you said, but I think that as you get more seasoned and as you go on, you'll find what is for you and what's not for you, and what you want to do and what you don't want to do, or what's important to you and what's not important. But when you first get to the city or first get out of school, it's important to be open to any possibility and opportunity, because like you just never know what awaits there too. Like you could have like this really closed-minded, approach to it and be like, I'm not going in for that. And then you might be robbing yourself of an amazing experience. Like I did a show in Chicago before I left at Theo Ubique, which is a small dinner theater, but they like win. Yes, Scott. Oh, you're clapping.
I'm applauding what you're saying.
I did a show that was It was Man of La Mancha, and it took place in a psych ward. And we did a lot of research. We actually went to a mental institution, and we did a lot of things. And I would have been robbed of that experience if I didn't come back to Chicago and actually, be open to some possibilities. I got paid $200 for the entire run, which is absolutely nothing if you're trying to make a living. Luckily, I was living at home at that point, but um, it was such a rewarding experience, and it was just one of those things that builds you as an artist and creates, a more three-dimensional, artist going forward. And that's one of the experiences for me that I was just open to the possibility, and I felt like it like definitely I'd be a different artist if I didn't have that experience. um
Kevin, I have a couple of questions. I'm going to jump into here
yeah.
that are specific to you as an Asian American actor, because Maya McGowan, who's in this class, is a Korean American actor, and so
All
she
right.
has some specific questions. But also, I have several students of color that have questions around things that are in your bio and that you talk about. So here we go. I'd
Okay,
want
let's
to
hear
read
'em.
them verbatim. So, Kevin, as a Korean American actor, this is Maya speaking. I have found that my biracial identity can be a defining factor during casting decisions. How have you navigated the industry as an Asian American actor? And can you speak about opportunities you have had or maybe didn't have because race was a defining factor? What advice would you give to other Asian American actors about the industry and how to navigate it? And along those lines, in your bio, you say you are passionate about, quote, passionate about telling stories that give voice to marginalized communities. Can you speak more about some of your favorite works that you felt gave this voice? What advice would you give young artists that are passionate about this as well and would like to pursue that type of work?
So I love that you asked that question. Thank you, Maya.
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about this for all more marginalized communities. There's a lot of blind spots that I have too that I'm constantly learning as well. Dealing with race and dealing with casting or the industry, it's a very loaded thing because I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There are a lot. It's improved immensely. Like 10 years ago when I first got to New York, for Asian, I'm going to speak from my Asian experience just right now, but like, there were just getting shows that were like all Asian casts that were being developed as new works. Like it was just, and I was lucky to be here and to be a part of that community. And it's a very tight knit community here in the Asian American Broadway community. Um, but like I know many people who've been in the industry for a long time, and they never had that kind of opportunity, and a lot of them actually ended up pursuing other things because they just didn't have an opportunity to share their voice or tell their story. And for me, I seek out, and part of it is like when I hear somebody talking about something that's in line with what I believe art should do, I kind of reach out to them. I would say number one thing, this is another caveat for everybody, it's like don't be afraid to break the rules. Everybody sets up these rules. I'll tell you one story that specifically worked in my favor is when Allegiance was on Broadway. I've been in for it for the workshops for a long time, and the casting team knew me, and the director knew me, and I had a really crappy first round audition for Broadway. And I was like talking to a friend after the audition. I was like, I'm sick. I don't know what I can do. Like they handed me the director's email. So I was like, oh, like the ball's in your court. And I would say you don't want to do this all the time because, if you don't have any relationship with them, there's no connection and there's no reason why they should say yes. But literally they knew me, and I reached out to him and he went, well, just bring your A. I'm sorry to hear that. Bring your A game next time. And I got passed on the callback round. You know what I mean? Um, so like that experience, I just don't, that the lesson there is just don't be afraid to do something because somebody told you not to. Like if you connect to the thing as a human being and you connect with that person, whatever their project is, like what they're passionate about, it's really easy to find that bridge. to find, some kind of connection in that reach out or that correspondence. But going back to race and, ethnic relations when it comes to theater, it's like, yeah, like the statistics will tell you that there's a lot more Caucasian actors being employed. There's a lot more Caucasian creatives, casting directors, and part of the thing is like, that's just the reality of the situation. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a neutral thing. That's the way that it is, right? And I think that there's a way for all of us to create and to connect while making art in a way that doesn't just benefit, a majority of somebody else. Like, I think that's the reason why I'm so passionate about creating for marginalized communities, because there's a lot of people who don't feel like they can step up and say what they need to say, and yeah, all right, Kira, that's what I'm saying. I see you. But like, that's important as an artist, not being able to be censored and to be able to say what you need to do when it has intention and motivation about it. And that's one thing. Okay, Scott just brought something up that I am a victim of for sure. So we talk about like the box that the industry puts you in, the box, and this goes for everybody. The box, like, I put myself in a box within a box for a long time. And I'm telling you right now, there's no artistic creativity or freedom in that at all. So I invite all of you to release all of that, break down the four walls. You don't need to just have four walls to create as an artist. Like you can have infinite space, and you could do it at every given place. I quote Billy Porter all the time about this. And he's kind of like secretly my spirit animal. Nobody really knows this, but Maria, when it comes to his understanding of valuing art at every given level. Like he said this, and I wish I could find I couldn't find the quote in the interview, but he was talking to a bunch of college kids at Carnegie Mellon, I think, where he went, and he literally said, you can't pick and choose what is important in the sense of like, oh, I can't do this because it's a small reading, it doesn't pay anything. I want to be on Broadway. It's like, if you can't value, reading a play with your friends in your living room, like that doesn't have the same value as being on Broadway. You shouldn't be doing it at the highest level. That's what he believes.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that.
Yeah.
I think that you really, truly need to have that silver lining in whatever you do. I've done some shows where I'm like, okay, I don't know if I agree with this. But then I have to find the silver lining, and maybe I can have a conversation with somebody who's creating it to, when it comes to, I'm talking about specifically, I did a show called, well, I'm not going to call it out actually. But I did a show that had to do with, it was a pretty much all Asian cast, but a non-Asian creative team. And there were certain things in there that were very yellow facey, like tokenish stuff. And this is very common in a lot of pieces that I've done with teams that didn't have that perspective and understanding. But like I was able to have a conversation on the side of certain blind spots they had. And it wasn't me being preachy. It was just being like, hey, I'm just gonna let you know this is how I received it. And I was wondering if you approached it from this way, what would happen? And like how the story would be told a different way.
I think that's a good thing to say, though, is don't be afraid to speak up as well. Change is happening at a slow pace,
for sure.
But it's happening. But I think it's important to approach it in the appropriate way as well. And again, it's trying to break down those boxes that we are put into. And I think one of my favorite stories is, one like positive, huge thing about Mean Girls too is, or the first thing I noticed is that there are 6 female principals in the show. What? Amazing. And there are I think it was like 6 Asians in the show as well, when it has nothing to do with an Asian story. And then my friend Ashley De La Rosa, she was the standby for Gretchen and Regina. And when she was first going she's amazing.
Yeah,
The first time she was
she's
going
incredible.
in, she was saying, she's like, "Ugh, I'm getting looked at for Mean Girls. This is okay. Well, I'm just gonna get in front of Casey just because he'll probably look at me for like Book of Mormon, right? Like that's really why I'm going into this audition. I'm looking at everybody else in this room, and clearly I don't fit in. So this is why I'm going, is just to be seen as Book of Mormon." And she's going into the room and she's reading for it, and they wanted to have her come in for a callback, but she wasn't able to come in that day. And then they were like, "Great, we're gonna put this on tape for Tina." And she's like, "Tina who?" And they're like, "Tina Fey."
Oh, that's all. This is also a lesson to everybody.
No.
This is why you have music theater history.
Yes.
This is why, because like in Maria's program, they don't really have that. And like, you know, I
They do,
learned
it's just
so
not as
much.
emphasized,
Yeah,
which
but
is-
this is why it's emphasized. You need to know and have a reference point of like who you're working with and what, like stylistically,
Yeah.
specifically, if somebody says, you know, I want something like, you know, Annie Blankenbuehler, like,
Right.
and they're like, oh, who's Annie Blankenbuehler? Like, people are going to look at you and be like, well, like, you could have just like Googled it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like when you're looking through your script and you don't understand a word and you need it to be defined. Just Google it. Like, figure out who these people you're working with. Figure out the people, you know, who they're trying to model it after.
But in the end, what I was saying is,
Yeah, I
like,
know, but
girl booked that job, and she was one of the fiercest
She
Reginas
was.
I have ever seen. And she was the first Regina of color, and
Yeah.
and now the new Regina standby is half Chinese. Our current standby for Janice, Katie, and Adult Woman was half Chinese, but now she just took over Janice. So now we have our first person of color as Janice as well. Oh, and she was the first person of color to play like Adult Woman. Like, it's awesome that they are starting to like break down these walls. But I will say there was a learning curve though as well. There are some things that needed to be approached while we were working through these things, and we actually had a lot of line changes as well because like, what was it? One of the lines for Aaron Samuels, they talk about like pushing his hair back, but one of the understudies is African American, and they changed the line to like the color of his eyes or something. And so it's kind of cool that we have like different adaptations depending on who's playing it as well.
Yeah, because then it becomes a little bit of a cultural appropriation thing.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, you just don't want to walk down those lines.
Right.
Hey,
Did that answer the
while
question?
yeah, it did. While
Right.
we got Maria on Mean Girls, we have lots of questions about Maria. What is your experience like as a swing? Can you tell us about the preparation and different as a swing versus an understudy? How do you learn 30 tracks and 7 Broadway shows? That seems crazy.
Yeah. So my first time swinging ever was at Good Speed, and I was swinging carousel. And so that was kind of the first time I had to figure it out because no one really teaches you how to swing. So, which is that's something I'm trying to like develop for myself, is like some sort of class on how to do it. But so it was like having to go through so many different ways of how I was going to approach it all. And then so my first time swinging on Broadway was Cats, and I was an addition to the show. And with Cats, it's a really big show to learn. It's basically a completely different show for every single cat. There's like hardly any unison moments. So with that show, I started off with learning 4 cats, and the residential choreographer, she basically walked me from the top of the show to the bottom of 1 cat. And that cat kind of does like a lot of everything. And then one girl in the show had broken her nose, and then another girl was leaving. So I was kind of put on the back burner for a second, and then they had to teach these 2 brand new girls because they had to get into the show immediately. So then I was kind of stuck on this 1 track for like a month, and then we walked through my second cat, and then my third cat, I had 2 rehearsals. I had 1 rehearsal to learn the first act, and I had 1 rehearsal to learn the second act. And then I ended up going on for that track. So my first week at Cats in performances, I debuted 3 cats. And the first one was
You can snaps.
the first one was Tantamile, the twin. Then I did Electra, and then the one cat that I had 2 rehearsals was the white cat. And
Which she ended up replacing temporarily.
Yeah. But so that day was pretty interesting because the day before, they kind of had an idea that we were running out of coverage. And so my residential choreographer, she told me, she's like, just so you're aware, like, it could be a possibility as a heads up. And then that morning I got the text I was on, and all of a sudden it was just like, okay. But the way to approach that too, I started reviewing at home. Then we had a quick rehearsal because there's a big pas de deux that happens. And so we had a rehearsal just to basically run that. And then my residential choreographer was like, what do you need? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I need a nap. I don't know if I need food. I don't know if I need to I'm not really sure right now. But so I went and tried to take a nap, but obviously didn't really work. But then I got ready, and because then if you're debuting a new track, you most likely had a 15-minute spacing rehearsal, and that was to run the heavy traffic moments, which is basically the whole show. So you would run the opening because that was kind of like the craziest part. And then there were specific parts in the ball, depending on who you were, that had really crazy traffic moments. And then you would try to run every single lift that you would do. And then that was kind of it. And so with the white cat, I remember putting my makeup on, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is fine. It's good. We're great. Sure. This is fine. Great. Yep. Here we go. It's my job. I don't have a choice. Then they put the wig on, and I think that was the first moment, was like, oh my God. I'm about to debut a track that I've never run through ever. Here we go. And then I just remember crawling on stage, and I don't remember much more of that show, but it seemed to have gone very successfully. Thank goodness.
She ended up replacing. Yeah, it went very well.
Yeah, so. And then with that show, I ended up replacing that cat I got to take over that role for a while. And by the end of Cats, I ended up covering 6, which I was the female swing that covered the most female cats, I guess, which is kind of cool.
Can you talk about when you had to do the kind of Broadway history split coverage? Of like, was it
she's got one story with Cats that we have to share, okay?
Okay.
She did something that's never really been done before ever.
So,
she split track two principal parts in the same day.
So
and Evan could tell you the story because he was there. He was in the show.
So with Cats, our white cat was out on vacation, and then Rumpelteazer broke her foot. So the other white cat cover was sick with the flu, and then our other Rumpelteazer cover had no voice. They could not speak even. And they were trying to figure out how they were going to do this. At this point, our residential choreographer was out working on Brigadoon.
At City Center, which is down the street.
And then our dance captain was out sick with the flu as well. So I was like, myself, who I wasn't a dance captain, was going through and figuring out, like, okay, if we have the Rumpelteazer who doesn't have a voice, we could at least use her body for like specific things, but I think we could do a split track. So that morning, as we're getting ready, the music director and the other rump cover they were downstairs trying to sing, and my stage manager came into the dressing room. He was like, we might have a singing in the rain moment. I was like, what do you mean by that? He's like, Fran might like dance the feature and you might sing it off stage.
You ended up doing it all, though.
Well, so with that, I was like, that's impossible. Like, with that number, everything is taken off of each other, of like looking and being like, well, the family will say, like, it's all interactive with each other. It would have looked terrible. And then his phone rang and the music director was like, we can't do it. So he looked at me, he's like, what's that split track? I was like, well, so I'll start as the white cat. This part I'll exit. So I had my face painted as the white cat. So basically, overall, I did a split track of Victoria and Rumpelteazer, like the two heaviest female tracks. And this is another funny moment. We had our lift call, and there's a really big lift with the white cat where all the boys are stacked on this tire, and she jumps and they lift her up, and then she comes shooting back down. And we're getting ready, and then that's when they announced to the boys, like, Maria's doing the split track of Rumpelteazer Victoria. And all the boys were like,
how are we going to do that?
No. And they all got quiet, and they were like, good luck.
Well, like, this is how amazing she is. She was able to, like, have it in her mind of how it will work, because everybody else there was no resident choreographer on site. She made this up. So she had to split it herself, and then she relayed it to the rest of her partners and in the cast.
So
and that's how it got done.
Basically how it happened. So I started out as the white cat, completely like face, wig, costume. Did all of that. Then when it came to the feature, I went out, and for the feature, Rumpelteazer wears a unitard, but then they also put these chaps on as well. And then we put the Rumpelteazer wig on. So I still had the white face still. But basically, I'm wearing 3 unitards at this time. And did the Rumpelteazer feature. And then there's the part where it's like, and there's nothing at all to be done about that. And it goes into slow-mo. So I exited, and then the other girl went on as Rumpelteazer. I ran around backstage, quickly stripped down, and then it was the white cat again, and had just enough time to run off stage and dive off to go greet old Deuteronomy. But yeah, I think that was one of the craziest moments I've had. But that definitely prepared me for my career, basically.
Because that's all you do in every show.
Yes.
When it's about to fall apart.
Yeah, I've had to do a lot of saving, I guess. But again, truly couldn't have done it without my other swing sister, the one who didn't have a voice, because if we didn't have her body there, that would have just been like completely impossible. So we were really, really, I think that's the really biggest part, is your swing team is your family. That team truly holds everything up. And so if you're ever in a show with swings, you need to treat your swings with the most respect ever. It is, I cannot emphasize that enough. It is so important, and it is one of the hardest jobs ever. And the swings will make it look flawless. And anyway, so that's that little soapbox moment. But so each show kind of works differently. So with Cats,
what's the process of like?
Right. So with Cats, again, I was kind of walked through the entire show with each cat. With Frozen, it was a little different story because I had joined the company 2 weeks after they had opened, and I had my audition on a Monday and then started rehearsals that Tuesday, the next day. And again, it was very rushed. I had 8 days to learn 10 tracks. So with that process, it was a little different. We ran from one track to beginning to end. And then I basically learned another track because they were very similar to each other. And then that residential choreographer, she was like, actually, here's just the rest of the choreography in the show, just in case we don't have time to walk you like step by step by step by step. So that process was completely different. That was a lot of like homework for myself. And then when I joined Mean Girls, it was even a completely different process too, where they kind of taught the unison moments of the show, and then it was my job to kind of figure out the rest and track everything else by myself. So each show kind of works differently in that regard. But yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So Kevin, I'm gonna pick you up again with They want to know what's it like being a Chicago kid all your life and now being a New Yorker. And
Well,
I don't know if he's a New Yorker yet.
Whoa, I'm at the 10-year mark.
He doesn't consider it though.
and they want to know what your biggest piece of advice for graduating seniors and your biggest lessons you learned at Wesleyan are.
Oh, okay. Biggest lesson I learned at Wesleyan is learn how to breathe, relax. I was an overworker when I was a Wesleyan, and I actually, in my sophomore review, they definitely were like, "We're concerned about you. Like, all you do is you go to like a practice room or a dance studio, and you don't have a real life." They didn't really say that word for word, but that was kind of like the takeaway for me was that like, if it's not enjoyable, it's not worth it. Like, there has to be some kind of attachment to fun, and what you're passionate about. And I began to find those little key things and those bridges for me, for myself, and what that means, and I always say this to everybody in my life now: self-care, especially during this time, is so important. Like, you got to treat yourself, because that, even in quarantine, you got to do it. And that's one of the things that I learned. The seeds were planted at Wesleyan, and then I've continued to foster that and to discover that and what that means for me. I'm a Chicago kid through and through. I'm from Rogers Park. I'm very passionate about being from Chicago. I will say this though, I helped move my twin sister out of her apartment our junior year of college, and that's when my first trip to New York was ever. And I literally stood there in Times Square after seeing a show, and I was like, oh man, I could live here. Because the whole entire time I was like, no, who wants to live in New York? Like, seriously, tens of millions of people. You can't think there's so many people. Yes, Rogers Park. And the thing is, like, I eventually learned to love, because New York is a love-hate relationship. Then it graduates to hate to love it, and then you just kind of love it in the end because it's just such a unique beast and experience.
Has anybody not been to New York?
Yeah. Oh, everybody. Okay, one.
Yeah.
I think Braden and Sharon, is that right?
I've never been.
Yeah, Braden and Sharon have never been yet.
Yeah, if you can ever get, especially from Chicago, Southwest got cheap flights, so you can get that. That's what we fly.
Everybody's got cheap flights now.
And it brings you to
so now they do, yes.
Don't come now.
Wait a while. Wait a year, please. Because we're in the thick of it. We're in New York right now.
But it drops you off at LaGuardia too, which is the better airport.
Yeah. LaGuardia. Well, it's under construction. But I would say, I haven't lost being from Chicago and being from the Midwest. There's a mentality and like consideration of being, from the Midwest. You have this understanding of like a little bit Midwest hospitality, but like you're not afraid to engage in a conversation, especially being from Chicago. Like, it's a big city. Like you like, I feel like being from the city and learning the lessons I grew up being in the city. Like, I had street smarts. Like, I moving to New York was just more people. That was it. I actually think I feel a lot safer in New York than I do in Chicago, to be honest. Like, because there's always people out. But that's a whole nother thing. But I feel like you don't lose. Yeah, you don't lose who you are. Like, it's just remember to keep. Like, I'm wearing my Chicago shirt right now. I did that because in case there are people from Chicago. It's one of those things that's a comfort too. I have a Chicago flag. She won't let me put it up because it looks ugly, apparently. But in general, like, you got to do the things that make you feel like home for you.
It is one of the best cities. You learn so much about everyone. The culture here is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you will meet people at your work,
from all
people
walks
who live,
of life. It's
or
awesome.
neighbors. Yeah, all walks of life. New Yorkers are hustlers, so like everybody has 3 jobs, unless you have like a really steady job. Majority of the city are working class people who hustle, like know what hard work is, And like, that's the only way you kind of get by. But it's a great lesson to learn, because I've been here for 10 years, and like, I've earned every year that I've been here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I worked really hard, and I can acknowledge that, but it's a goal. It's like a tool and lesson that I've learned of how to sharpen since I've been here. Because that will help you in all areas of your life, including in this industry. Because I mean, this industry, there's a lot of people, and how the key is like, how do you stand out? But like, how do you stand out in your own authentic way? Because like what Scott said to me when I was there, and I've heard this from many other teachers too, is that you're enough. Like, it's so cliche, everybody will repeat it. Like, you are enough. And if you're able to hone in on that, and to be able to find that gem and light it up, that's what people are going to pay attention to, because somebody wants to see the same thing, you know. Like, there's too many people who do the same thing. Like, fine, you can do triple pirouette, okay, but can you tell a story through movement? You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between technique, which is very important, but how do you merge the two? Like, how do you do those things? Like, you know, when, for example, 8-bar audition, right? Sometimes you got to do these stupid 8-bar auditions, which make no sense. But what I always do to stand out is to act for those entire 8 bars. I don't sing a money note. I don't do anything, and I always get a call back, because everybody's trying to hit a high B flat or whatever their high note is, for guys, and it makes no sense, because everybody's trying to do it. How are you going to stand out? You know, and that's a perfect example. There's so many different areas, and that's just one way you can apply it.
Okay, so give me Maria, give me one show that you think had the biggest impact on, you know, again, these are not my questions, but the biggest impact in getting you to where you are today and making you kind of the singer, dancer, actor that you are today.
I would definitely say Cats. There's no show that I've been in and that I can even think of that has that much singing, that much acting, and that much dancing in it. So it definitely strengthened me as a triple threat artist. But also just the growth that I learned from that show being a swing, and also learning that it's not about you. It is about every single person that is a part of that show, and not just on stage, backstage, the ushers, the dressers. That day that I did that split track, could not do that by myself at all. I needed those dressers, I needed the stage managers, I needed everybody in my cast to work and help. So I think that was actually the biggest lesson I had learned as well, that it's just like, it's not about you ever. It's about the whole piece and community of that.
And that's something Wesleyan does better than every other school. You appreciate and honor and understand all areas of the arts. I can't tell you how many people I've seen who come from these top conservatories, which is fine, but they don't know how to respect other people and their process in the whole thing. It's like,
Yes.
Everybody from stage crew to stage management to company management to
Yes.
the performers to the creative team. They're all different puzzle pieces to this whole big picture. And like, that's the only way it works. If one thing is out of whack, then it's not going to be the same thing. So it's like, you got to respect your other creatives in the process.
Yeah, it's about how are you to work with? Are you a team player or not? Because I had actually found out when I was up for one of my jobs, afterwards I had found out that that creative team was reaching out to a previous creative team I had worked with, and they were like, how is Maria to work with? How, like, is she a good blah blah blah? So your representation really matters too.
People talk. I actually had an instance where somebody actually asked me for who's a friend of mine, but I know he's super, super difficult to work with. And they asked for an honest recommendation, and I had to give it. I had to give him like what was in the process, because he's been known to go into shows and be the same way. And at some point, like, you know, that what goes around does come around. Like, you know,
and it all trickles down too.
Like, you look at Audra McDonald, like, who's like my queen bee for, everything in this industry. Like, she literally respects everybody at such a high level. I mean, she, you know, when Bree was in
Porgy
Porgy
and
and
Bess.
Bess, you know, I got to go backstage and I got to meet her real quick. But I remember Audra going out to the autograph line, and like, that role was exhausting and so different than she ever done before. Like, it was just a physical thing, and like, she was so selfless, and she was able to go through the line, give autographs, but have like personal connections with every single person. And this is to each their own. You know, not everybody has to do this. Like, not, you know, people, you know, process that and do things differently. But that was like something that goes above and beyond. And she understood that's part of her job. Some people don't understand that, and it really does affect the way you view, you know, the artistic process a lot of the times. Because I think the people who pass on the line, who are like, oh, we're going out the secret back entrance, you know, exit, so I don't have to sign, is also a way of not having that awareness. You know, that's what X Hours does, you know, having to be on a light hang, which I got out of doing a light hang. I don't know how, because I master carpentered 2 shows, but that was different. But, you know, it's those situations that might be grueling work, and you're doing that, it it pays off in the end. It creates something, an awareness and a tool that is so usable. You know, Kurt Trout taught me how to paint a set. When I first moved to New York, my first job was working for a flower shop where I had to do all this install work and all this stuff. And if half the stuff that Kurt didn't treat Army taught me, like, I would have never had that job. You know what I mean? And that's outside of the business, but that has helped. You know, I worked on small shows where you like, the only way to do is like, somebody know how to drill this in, or somebody know how to like paint this floor. And you just, you know, that's part of it.
Kevin, same question for you. So, but there's one caveat to the question for you that they didn't write for Maria, which is, so the show that changed you, but they want to know one from Wesleyan and one outside of Wesleyan.
Ooh. What show at Wesleyan? I got to go through. This is a long time ago, Scott. You know what,
Please, it's not
Scott?
that long. Y'all are still young.
I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it because you want me to say it, and also I
What is it?
understand. It's probably Edges, because I'm
Aw.
also producing the show.
Oh.
That was my first show. That's
yeah,
good.
it was your first show. And honestly, this is another thing. Don't be afraid to reach out. I reached out to Scott. I didn't even know him, and I got him to direct my show. So, and it was a
very,
great
very
process.
persistent. Very persistent.
I was, wasn't I? I learned a lot in that process. Never to be a producer again. But it stretched me in many different ways. You know, I think that people at school saw me through a different lens after that too. Were able to see some things that I saw in myself that I was like, I don't know entirely sure how to put this out there. And I want to be this kind of artist, or I want to create these kind of things. And, you know, I want people to be able to connect with that, because I want to collaborate with people. I love collaboration. And that, you know, that's another thing. Love's Labor's Lost too, that Sandra directed. I was in an acting company in high school at Piven Theater in Evanston, Illinois. And, you know, we were an ensemble. So like, that was everything to me, viewpoints, all that kinds of stuff. And, you know, we used a lot of that. We were a true ensemble in Love Labor's Lost. Like, that group was really tight knit. And it was the only Shakespeare I did in college, I think.
It's still my favorite one we've done. Of all the ones
it was a really good show.
Yeah, it's good.
And it was because we developed it from the ground up. It was a process. It wasn't just a product, you know. Professionally, my favorite show I've ever done is On the Side of the World.
Oh, yeah.
It's this show, and I just recently did the show off Broadway that literally is from the perspective of an American immigrant. And I can't tell you how many people who came into the theater who were not immigrants. Some people weren't American, some people, whatever. It was a human story, and it connected with people beyond any imagination we all had. And it was very successful. It's been remounted once, and hopefully we can move to a bigger house if, you know, that ever comes to fruition. But it was something that I felt like the world needed right now, you know, and I needed for sure. And it was Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful song cycle. Yeah, and that really affected the way I look at things for sure. Is that all to the question? Was there more
Yes,
to it?
awesome. No, okay. So now they have some real, because the senior class has not had their kind of a lot of their final things, their last musical, their last soda shop, all these things that are
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
that. But what this so that's part of why I developed this series with alums and alums partners to talk to them about what is some advice that you'd love to give seniors that you wish you maybe you didn't hear, or maybe you did hear it but you think it's worth repeating. But what's some really important advice for people who are about to start this process, even though we all know we have no idea what the theater or the world's going to look like after all this. It will be different, but let's say that we're not in the middle of a pandemic. What are some things, for what and your experience for the last decade in New York City, for both
yeah.
of you? What is some advice you'd give these seniors?
So I've actually been struggling with this question because I've heard it a few times teaching different like master classes and everything. And one that I normally stick to is what we've kind of already talked about in regards to being kind to every single person that you meet. But I do struggle with this too because I don't think anybody's path is the same. And so it's kind of hard to give advice in a very specific way because just because it worked for me doesn't mean it works for somebody else
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I know I've had a lot of privileges in my life, and especially that year in 2018, I've been very, very fortunate. And I know I don't get or that I have other opportunities that others might not. So it's kind of hard to, I've struggled with this question. And I think that's why I always kind of fall down to, or not fall down to, always recommend being kind to every single person that you meet.
For me, dare to fail
Mm.
every step of the way. You know,
I just see all the like,
like
oh.
what?
Everybody's just like the
Even the
weight.
teachers are like, where is he going from here? um, no, dare to fail because this is a lifelong process. Even if you stopped being an artist here right now, actually, you would never stop being an artist. First off, if you stopped pursuing this in the industry, which is a reality for some people, but there's so much to learn and to experience and to grow from. I mean, I'm taking online classes right now.
Yeah.
I'm taking a class at Yale, the science of being happy and wellness, and it's free too. And I did it so I could tell my parents I went to an Ivy League school, but no, but like, yeah, like dare to fail, take a risk. Like we talk about it in acting. You talk about given circumstances, you talk about the stakes. Like if you're doing it on stage, I don't, that doesn't mean like, go to extremes and like, oh, I'm going to test like my abilities as a human in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to jump off this fire escape and see if I can land it. No, don't do that. I don't recommend that. But I'm saying in general, like put yourself in uncomfortable situation, parkour. Um, put yourself in uncomfortable situations. So I took Alba emoting. It's one of the tool sets that I have. I study with a master teacher in New York, and I first heard from it from Nancy Lloyds at Wesleyan, um, with the step out and whatnot. And it's something that she always says to me. My master teacher, she always says, you got to learn to be comfortably uncomfortable.
Mm.
You got to live in those moments. Those are the moments of true growth, and those are the true moments of like aha moments. Those are moments that like all the hard work, it's like, oh my God, okay, it pays off, because you're going to be uncomfortable. That's one thing you have to understand is no matter what you're doing, what process you're doing, you're going to always feel uncomfortable because you might be doing it for the first time. You might not have any knowledge of what that is, but the effort there and the openness to learn from it is going to set you on your path to, of success, quote unquote, because success looks different in so many different ways.
Actually thinking about that too, I feel like one step I kind of got stuck in, and even still to this day, I feel so comfortable in the classroom to explore anything and everything. And but the second I was going into audition rooms, all of a sudden I was just like backing away, and I was so scared to take risks, and it shows. You don't get as many callbacks when you're not yourself, you're not open, you're not willing to take those risks and chances and choices. So try to work on that balance. I mean, of course, it's going to be different with the audition versus a classroom, but still remember that it is a collaboration in the audition room. They are looking at you to be the answer in that room.
Yeah, they're waiting for you to show you.
Yeah.
They don't, half the time they really don't know what they want.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
They never know what they want. No one ever knows.
Like, they're just like, okay, let's just hope somebody that we think is really talented and fits what we kind of think of it. But like the ones that surprise them, because like I bet we both been on the other side of the table. That's also another thing too. If you have the opportunity to do that
really
at any
fun.
point, you know, even if you're in school to do it, it's super educational. It just gives a whole different perspective. It also gives you the permission to feel that like it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And one thing I'll tell to everybody, you know, if I'm like teaching a class, is like show up to give. Like every time you go and do something, it will take the pressure off. Like don't make it about like, oh, I got to do better, you know, better. Like I'm giving something. I'm giving my art, my craft, whatever it may be. Or you're, you know, this is something you're connecting to with somebody you love, like your family member. It's like this is a gift. Like my mom didn't get to do this, so this moment I'm living right here is for my mom. Like for example, like, you know, and like it's super powerful and transcendent, and it's like, you know, it really does work because, you know, fun fact, like neurologically, like nerves are the same thing as excitement. It's just what your brain tells you. If you reframe it, it's the same same stimulus. Yeah. So why not reframe it? Why not, you know, choose to give yourself permission to go to that uncomfortable place or vulnerable place, or to fail? Because failure is not really failure. Like,
And you learn so much from that too.
The best moments happen in failure too. Scott can tell you that.
Yes, you always learn more from failure than success.
Yeah.
That is a wise thing. Hey, okay, so I'm looking through the questions. I think we've covered most of them. The couple that I think that we've missed, they wanted, several people wanted to know more about Maria's teaching and also about how she keeps her dance. You know, now that you're working, you know, are you still going to class a lot? How do you keep it together? And also, how do you keep it together in, you know, this confinement?
Yeah,
and then also, you've alluded to it, Kevin, but they want a little more information about how do you continue that lifelong learning, you know, post-graduation, how do you keep going and making sure that you're growing?
Yeah. I would say during shows, I try to work on the opposite technique that I'm not using in the show. So like with Mean Girls, there was more hip hop based, so I was taking more like ballet. When I was in Anastasia, that was very ballet focused, so I was trying to work on like more other styles and jazz and such. But I will say right now, the first week of this quarantine, I was very motivated. I was going to yoga every day. I was going to ballet every day. And then I hit a slump. And I think part of it is I literally haven't stopped since Cats closed, which was
3 years ago,
2017. Yeah. So I did find my body needed to have a break and actually stop. And I'm still working through this whole quarantine thing.
We all are though.
Yeah.
You know?
And I do have a hard time with online classes, like physical classes. I found that ballet is kind of the easiest for me in a sense of finding joy within it. Because when I'm watching some of these classes, they're usually using the front camera of their phone. And so they're like, my right hand, which technically looks like their left hand. So they're really like mirroring you. And so then I was just like, oh, I can't. But also what I found for myself as an artist is I miss the energy of having people to work with, even if we're not like, even in just like the classroom setting, just having that energy. I miss that so much. But so what I've been finding for myself is being attracted to other creative outlets. I really like to sew and I like to craft a lot. So I kind of started doing that, which I don't normally get to do during shows because there's not as much time available. But even today, it was just like my friends, we were just chatting about this right before, and it was just like my friend found out that she really likes writing now. And she's like, my writing can actually be changed in or turned into poetry. So she's finding that. And then I was like, yeah, I want to dig into like a song again. I haven't like worked on a song in such a long time because my process lately has been like, learn this, do this, like get on stage, go. So I kind of miss the artistic side of performing, which is so silly because I'm performing all the time, but it's a different muscle that's being worked. So yeah, I think for myself, I've been finding a lot of that aspect. But I have been sitting on the couch for 2 weeks and I have been finding the motivation to get back up on my feet again.
And this gives us motivation too.
Yeah.
I mean, being able to talk to people who are about to walk through, the same kind of path we've walked for the last 10 years too, is it's inspiring to see that, especially amongst the adversity. Because in my own career, I've had a lot of adversity, but I've always found a way to wrap around it and figure out how to make it work for me, and how I can. Oh, what did you say?
No, go ahead.
Go for it.
Well, I just realized too that you were telling Dan the other day that one of our friends is hopefully going to be preparing to get back into a show after this, and he's just like, I don't know about my body, blah blah blah, and worried about that. And you were saying something about the mobility of the.
Oh yeah, because I've gotten injured a lot. Yeah. I've actually learned how to be better and functional.
And that's part of this too. I'm still working through an injury at the moment, so that was the other reason why I became very unmotivated.
Yeah, because you're hurting a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I think that she was trying to make a point of. I was talking to my friend Dan, who's supposed to start a Broadway show in September, and hopefully, yeah. And he was like concerned about keeping his fitness up and keeping his physique up, and I was like, I would not worry about that so much right now. Like, you work out, but like really do things that are like functional, like being able to like stretch, do functional movement, calisthenic things that are like less high impact, so you can actually, because
like the joints, like making
that's how you don't get injured. You're stacked properly. You do the things that are actually going to, the way your body actually really wants to move and work.
You'll learn that as you get older too.
Yeah, that is true. You will.
You become a smarter artist.
You do. Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
For me personally, I've been so I belong to the Jen Wallman studio. I'll give her a shout out because she's a wonderful teacher here in New York. Yeah. And she does focus mostly on music theater, but there are a lot of things in it. So she's actually been super resistant to having online stuff, and this whole thing kind of forced her hand, and she's been like innovative. There's not really many acting studios that have gone completely online, and I'm taking 8 different classes right now. I'm taking Intro to Puppetry. I'm taking impulse training, which has to do with being more spontaneous and more organic with your choices. I'm taking Live Your Physical Life, what has to do with brain, and that's a lot of Laban and viewpoints. I'm how to watch a film. We're doing Hitchcock film, and I'm learning how like the themes and how those things, and what in the studio we talk about find the rhyme. Like, what's the common ground? What's the bridge to all these things? How do we connect all this to make ourselves a better artist? And that's what.
Kevin, can you give us the name of that studio again? Can you?
Jen Wallman. Yeah, let me type it out.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing too. I always said like, oh, I wish I could just be a student for the rest of my life because I love learning. I loved being in school, and I think that's exactly what an artist is, like a performing artist is. You never stop learning. There's always something new to work on. So yeah, I think that's another.
I'm getting a link in there too.
Oh, no, nice. Good.
I think honestly, I'm sure I missed it because they're gonna call me on it. I'm sure if I missed a question, if I
Whoops.
their individual.
Sorry, these are all to Kira. My bad, everybody.
I was gonna say, are you just talking to Kira? Kira's having her own private Chicago moment. You gotta be careful what you say to Kira because it all goes through a Chicago filter. But the thing is, listen. But what I want to do now, because we're at about 4:30, we have about a half an hour left. Is let me open it up to. Are there some questions, you guys, that you haven't gotten to ask them yet? Okay, Scott, I really want to know how Maria made a transition from performance student to teacher because it never stopped learning. How do you gain the confidence?
Right. We didn't talk about like the teaching part.
Yeah, I knew there was something I was missing that I hadn't gotten there. In Walden.
So again, I was really fortunate with AMDA. So again, with I got my BFA through the new school. And once I got my BFA, I actually got to start teaching at AMDA pretty quickly. And there I'm mostly a substitute teacher, just because there hasn't been a lot of time to commit to one class specifically. So with there, I kind of basically substitute any sort of dance class that they have. Yeah. But I also, are we still on? Yeah. Okay. I also teach a lot of master classes, usually with the shows that I'm in. And those classes are usually through just like random workshops that these people, that other like studios can approach. So most of my teaching comes through that. But a lot of that tends to fall on the weekends. And a lot of the shows have done 5-show weekends actually. So those days usually sometimes class starts at like 10 o'clock. You're teaching hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and then you're going into a 2-show day. So those weekends, I just realized that the weekend that I did that split track at Cats, the Rump and Victoria split.
Were you doing SpongeBob too?
No, so that morning I had done the split track. Then the Victoria cover felt good enough, so then I did Rumble Teaser that night. And then I had to teach a class that next morning at 9 a.m.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then I had to do the same exact thing.
Look, I'm not suggesting that you're like Maria. Maria's insane. Like she's actually known as the Energizer Bunny on Broadway. Like she literally does things that most humans are not possible. Like, but like she's got a point there. Is like there's so many different areas that you can work on and like.
Well, I think particularly one of the questions that Emily's trying to ask is, when did you feel confident enough to go from being the student to being the teacher?
You've been teaching for all your life, right?
I think part of that is I actually started teaching when I was around 16 years old. And that was at my home studio. And so that was just, at the beginning, it was teaching like younger kids or even just like assistant teaching.
This is dance?
Yeah, this is a dance. And so with that, it was like, kind of starting as an assistant dance teacher. And then I was, they had the confidence actually in me to start teaching my own classes. And then that was also developing like my own choreography. And so when I was getting ready for AMDA or teaching at AMDA, I was a little nervous because I was still young, or I was still kind of close to the age of the students that were coming in. It was nerve-wracking going in, but I think it was also knowing that you don't always have to have the answers as a teacher.
Scott's clapping.
And I think
Jairus is like, yeah, I've been saying this for years.
I think that was a nice thing to know going into class, is knowing that you're not going to have all the answers. And you actually learn a lot from your students. And when you start teaching more and more, you learn more and how you're going to set up your class and everything. So you actually learn a lot from kind of diving in. And we've actually been talking about this too, because you wanted to start getting into teaching classes. And so a lot of our friends who do that, they'll even set up like a mock class with their friends just to kind of get used to it. And
low stakes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I just teach dancers at the moment for acting, but I could probably venture out further.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Y'all want to raise your hand and I'll call on you to directly ask them a question. Carson?
Hi.
Hey, how you doing, Carson?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. So the question I have is for Maria. I saw your video. It was a tap video of the Mary Poppins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How did you book that project and like what was the process for that? Because that was really cool to watch.
Oh, thank you. So I actually got to be a part of that because my friend was the choreographer director. So he was somebody I went to school with, and we just kept in touch for a really long time. But with that too, he's a brilliant tapper, and I could tap, but I wanted to get to a level that he was at. So I was starting to take private classes with him. And then I think with the other boys in that video, a lot of them started taking his class as well. Because it's when you are new and when you're new to like developing your own projects, I think that's a nice way for people to get to know you and also for you to get to know others, is kind of starting to have your own class. And a lot of that too is also, he had just worked with other people in that, in other shows with them. So yeah, that's kind of how that developed. And with that, we actually did that, or we had a couple rehearsals, and I had a couple private rehearsals with him just to learn like my more solo areas. But we shot all of that in one day. So it was fun.
Awesome. Kira?
Hello.
Hey, Kira.
I'm Kira. I just want to know, because I love to do everything and I have trouble balancing things. I love to write and produce, direct, and all those things, but I also love to perform. And he's laughing, but it's true. And I just wanted to ask, like, how do you, I just wanted, because Kevin, you brought up an off-Broadway show that you had talked about immigrants, and that really speaks close to me because I love to create things that further discussion about marginalized communities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But also I want to make a living and feed myself. So I was wondering how you got that opportunity to be like in both worlds, and both you can answer.
So
Well,
Kevin, Kira's our head of she's our head of our Shrink, multicultural theater company that didn't exist when you were a student. It happened after you, but yeah, she is. Several people are here. They're writers and they are directors, and they, much like you, have a lot of things that they're putting together.
Yeah. High five and yes. For me specifically, how I find the balance between all that is I ask myself the question, what's important to me? And like, what's the kind of art I want to make at this point in my career? And actually, sometimes that doesn't mean commercial theater making big bucks, because I've done it, and it's not always not always sunshines and rainbows, you know.
That's kind of what we were talking about in that balance of like, oh, I wish I had what you had. You wish I had what I had, because a lot of the commercial stuff might not feel like a passion project, but it's money.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the necessity to live and survive. But like I said, I like to look at the silver lining of all that. And, you know, what I have found in the last 5 years, when I literally was just like asking that question, what's important to me? And then I see like, oh, this person does something similar. I should reach out to them, and I'll reach out to this person too, because they reached out to me a while back, but I wasn't ready to say something. And that created projects out of themselves. Like my friend Priya and I did I don't know what to call it. It's a short film video of the last 5 years. And the whole purpose of the project was to bring attention to how representation matters. And like, we weren't trying to look at these people as, you know, she was Indian and, you know, I'm half Chinese and a mixture of things. We look at two human beings, you know, and looking through a different lens and see how that changed the piece. And that all happened because she asked me, and I was like, I'm passionate about that too, and I love your vision, you know. I think you'll find that there are a lot of people like you out there, even if you're in a place where you're like, oh, I don't feel that. There are a lot of people out there. There are a lot of artists out there who want to make something just like you, or want to create in the same way you do, or to address certain communities and voices like you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Y'all are so cute. Okay, bye.
How about one more? How about another question? Anyone?
I want to say, just to go off of that a little bit more,
Okay.
don't be afraid to reach out to others. Kind of, I mean, you were kind of saying
Reach
that,
out.
but yeah, don't be afraid to start. I mean, it's exactly how we were going back to that last video that we were talking about, the Mary Poppins one. My friend just was like, I want to create this, and reached out to his friends. And I think, yeah, a lot of friends will do, are willing to help you. I think that's important to say too.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of friends want to see you succeed as well, and so are willing to open themselves up to help you get those steps further. Because sometimes you have to do the projects that aren't paying. But even like our friend Jess reached out to Kevin to help with a reading that she had just wrote. And so it's just those little things help you learn about how to develop your work further. And
yeah, she can't use me for the production they're doing. But she literally was like, I loved your interpretation of the role. And it was kind of like planting a seed for her later that there might be something I got a role written for me that way once.
Yeah.
And I got to perform it this past summer, and it was pretty freaking awesome to be able to experience. Like, I literally planted that seed 8 years ago, and that friendship and relationship that I had with this composer, he's like, all the things that you've ever done of mine, like, this is the thing that I've been waiting to do. And he wrote a role for me.
Yeah.
So, and it was a really juicy role, and it was something that I really connected with too. It had to do with adoption, which I have a lot of friends who are adopted, and I think that's another story that needs to be told. What I was going to say, collaboration. She was talking about it. That's so important. You can't do anything on your own. I think a lot of people, you're so capable of doing so much, but just remember, there's so many other resources and people out there that can help you. And you probably won't get it done unless you actually reach out to somebody else, because it just makes it so much easier too, and fun.
Awesome. Okay, so let me see. Well, we're winding down. We just have a few more minutes. Is there anything else that you guys want to impart to us after this 2-hour journey?
Yeah, you got it for 15 minutes. You might as well use it.
Better use it.
I'm trying to think of other little.
Oh, Caitlin's got one. Caitlin Feely.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you guys? I was just gonna ask, how did you guys meet, and how do you balance your personal life along with your career and
Good question.
we got a masterclass on that.
So we actually met through mutual friends. I had worked at Ogunquit Playhouse at the beginning of the season, and a friend was doing Music Man with me. And then that friend did Miss Saigon with Kevin at Ogunquit later in the season. And then another friend who did Saigon, I did Radio City with. And they were all super close friends, and they were actually trying to set us up for like 2 years. But I was like, I don't know, I'm not ready for a relationship. And then we met at a party.
Oh yeah, we met at a birthday party, and that was all she wrote. We've been together ever since.
But actually, the balance is actually a really good question. This is kind of the most time we've actually spent with each other.
I think it's like 2 years.
Yeah, because even with the beginning of our relationship, it kind of started long distance. I was doing a lot of regional shows, and Kevin was home. And so thank goodness for FaceTime nowadays. That really helped a lot with just staying connected. I think I would say at the beginning of our career and relationship, it was finding the balance. And I think that's why we keep emphasizing that no journey will look the same, but yet we're both still successful, because it's hard not to compare. But that's why you have to kind of stop, because you're still succeeding, even if your paths don't look the same.
Like I said, I can't compare to her. She's the most successful person in this industry, so I don't even try. But I will say this in general, we did spend many years apart. I mean, there was 1 year where we only saw each other 3 months of the year.
you know, and that's tough.
Yeah.
But we have a very special connection, and we were committed to this relationship. And it was actually to a point where, you know, I was like, you got to come home. Like,
Yeah.
I've been working in New York, and that's a nice advantage for me, but she wasn't even auditioning for anything in New York. And I was like, I bet you money if you came home and you auditioned here right now, you would book something. And she booked West Side Story at Paper Mill.
Yeah.
And then that just ensued with, like, she stayed home and she booked all these Broadway shows and all that. And that's the reason why we've been able to spend time together. But then I went on the road with the King and I for 1.5 years, a little bit more than that. Like,
so then we actually switched, which was also a learning curve too. Is like,
she's not
then
used to
I
being
was
home.
the one being home, and then he was the one who was away. But I think one cool thing that we learned about when you are apart is learning to be an individual.
Yeah.
And then when you come back, it's like, oh, I've learned this and this and this and this. What'd you learn?
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to like communicate again and become a partnership.
And like, you know, really, truly, we're so different in so many different ways. I mean, you guys probably don't know this, but we're known as smalls and talls, because she's short and I'm super tall. But like, yeah, like we're very like complimentary of each other, and it's actually really cool to see her go off on an adventure and then come back, because she's always got these cool discoveries, and then like it helps unlock things.
That's what I was gonna say. It's so cool to see like your partner go and like succeed as well.
Yeah, it is super cool. Anybody else have any dying questions? Any professors?
Actually,
I'm sorry. I'm having to do too many things at one time because people keep getting bumped off, so they have to come back on. I have a question for you. But listen, I just have a statement, I guess, for the group. So, you know, Kevin is part of that special group, yes, that interviewed me and that got stuck in that snowstorm with me, and
that because our dorm was connected. We were in Pfeiffer.
Yes, and hired me. But the thing is, but the reality is that group of students were really here at a pivotal time for Illinois Wesleyan that kind of transformed into what the music theater program is now. And so I wonder about, so I've been able to watch him kind of go through this whole process. But I also, very early on when he and Maria got together, he would talk about her a lot. And it's been nice to watch her career as well. And I have to say, one of the things that I hear back about both of you a lot from people in the industry who will have a conversation, then they'll realize that I know Kevin, and therefore that I know Maria, is how nice you both are, and how nice you are to other people. And so one of the reasons I wanted y'all to come on and talk to them is I've always said that I think that my career was because I was nice to people, because there's a lot of talent out there, but there's also a lot of assholes. So, you know, a lot of times you get selected. So I would like you to, you know, maybe speak just a little bit more as we're winding down about how you maintain, though, that decorum, because this can be a very wearing career you both chosen. How do you stay up? How do you stay positive? What kind of practices do you have to help yourself stay in that place?
Yeah. I actually had one more thing to say about the last thing, just about our relationship. And I actually think this kind of correlates with what we're going to say next. I think we learned a lot from each other as well, being an interracial couple as well. And so I think
For sure.
being that, we've also learned to listen to a lot of people and really hear everybody's backgrounds and be open to hearing all of those different journeys and paths. And I think that's one big part of being kind, is just really hearing that person and hearing like what they have to say. And then I will say though too, with that, it just does get hard because a lot of people will come to you then because they know that you can listen. And a lot of actors need that. A lot of actors need to talk.
Listening is so important. That's one of the best. That's actually what makes great actors. I'm just gonna say that.
But then I think it's nice that we actually have each other to come back to at night, because sometimes we can vent about like, oh, this is happening at work. This is because that's the thing too, is that it does start to feel like a job, because it is. So it does get difficult at times, and you know, there are other certain shows that I've had situations with, and I remember coming to Kevin being like, oh, this is happening. And we kind of like, he'd let me vent for a little bit and then just be like, okay, now look at it from this point of view and look at this lens.
Yeah, I will say with that is your job doesn't define who you are.
Yeah.
And also you have to understand, like, it is a job. Like, there are parts of it that you're not going to love doing, especially at a commercial level. I would say this, like, there are just certain things that are sucked out of the process that just make it a little less friendly. But you got to worry what's in your control, you know, like what's in your control and what's not. And why do I love this? What's so important about this to me that I'm going to pursue this as a career? And, you know, I live my life through this lens, because that's more important. Like, not the fact that you're, you know, in a Broadway show, or not the fact that you're getting to do, you know, what you always thought you were meant to do. And there's something bigger behind all of that I always keep in perspective. And I just ask what's important all the time to me. Because it's important for me to get into this argument with my dressing room mate, who was being very inconsiderate and like not being considerate of boundaries and space, and also being rude. This is a random example, but this happens a lot, you know? And it's just like, what's important? You know, maybe that person's going through some crap that I don't understand, and then I just need to let it go. And then you put that in perspective and you move on, you do your job. Because, you know, that's what half the time for being a professional is being able to balance all that.
And I think it's also about staying humble. That's another reason why I love to teach as well, is especially going back to AMDA and teaching, because that's where I started from. And so seeing these students and seeing like these bright eyes and like the hopes and the dreams, and it's like, great, I'm doing what they're hoping for. Like, that's amazing. But then there are other times too where I'll walk by the line that's getting ready for the theater, or to go into the theater, and just to hear the little comments about like how excited they are about coming. It's like, right, this is for them. It's like, stop worrying about like what I'm going through right now, and remember that this is for somebody. And somebody had told me too that, remember, this might be somebody's first time seeing a show, and this might be somebody's last time seeing a show as well.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. It's so funny because literally my friend on the King and I tour, who was the standby for Anna, before she left, on her last show, she went, guys, just remember that this is somebody's first time ever seeing live theater and the last time. And that we should honor that in that process. And I think like the questions that we just asked there, what's important, what's not important, who's it for, who's it not for? Those are like 4 questions that I think you should write down and like ask, because that will also give you like a North Star of being like, okay, that's not for me. Okay, that's fine. It's for somebody else, but that's not for me. I know what this is. You go in that direction, you work out things that way. I think it's super easier to navigate the industry when you have that kind of internal, you know, North Star.
Another like simple act of kindness is learning names, especially of like the crew.
Yeah, for sure.
I know a lot.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have been with shows for years and still don't know like the head of props. They still don't know their name. And I come pretty close with, because why do we have to be above them or anything? They're still, I think that's why I always say like, it's never about you. It's about everybody doing this job. And I remember one of them venting to me and saying like, so-and-so, we were having a conversation, and then this actor just literally interrupted our conversation and completely ignored me, and still doesn't even know my name, even though I hand him a prop every single day, or multiple props every single day.
And if you just said hi in the first place,
right,
it probably changes the whole conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's really being able to value everybody and what they do.
Yes.
I mean, that's why you do X hours. That is the silver lining for X hours. Because you're that person who's handling props. You're that person handling wardrobe. You know, you're the run crew. You're hanging the lights. You know what it takes to do that. It's like, it's hard. And people are good at it.
And never diminish somebody's job. Like everybody's there for a reason.
And that actually makes a whole environment feel a whole lot better.
Yeah.
I've been in situations where people don't say hi to each other and people don't, you know,
Yep.
and unfortunately there's a lot of, in my commercial experiences, there's a lot of that going on because some people have been doing the job for 10 years. Some people have been, you know, and everybody has their own, you know, motivation for doing the job.
Yeah.
And you got to respect that too.
And I guess with that too is if you are in a long running show and somebody new joins, please make them feel welcomed. It is so hard to join a show and be the new person, especially when it has been running for a long time and really have already been established.
You're good. You're
Okay.
good.
So it is hard being that new person, and also because you're probably the only one in costume doing a put-in, and so all this pressure is kind of put onto you. And so it's always about like being loving, giving that good energy towards everybody.
Yeah.
We are at the end of our time. We have 1 minute left. Thank you so much. It is always a joy to see the both of you. I always look forward to it. Kevin has always been very, very good about when he's near, he comes by, he comes back to Wesleyan, even if it's just for, you know, a little bit of time. And Maria, I have loved every time we've run into each other in New York. It's funny is I think only once have I seen both of you in the city at the same time.
That is true. That's true.
For a while there, I saw Maria much more than I saw Kevin.
Yes,
But thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I know you all do. So everybody, let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you
guys
for your questions and everything.
Awesome. Don't let this quarantine like diminish any sort of artistry or hope or passion. Anything. Use this to drive you more.
Yeah. Take a day at a time.
Your showcase isn't your end all be all. What you do in this world will be more.
Yeah, it'll surpass that for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This has been great. Thanks so much, Kevin and Maria.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.